What's the most unreasonable reason you've ever been put in handcuffs? It was a Sunday in July. Hot. I'd gone out for a run that morning and I don't take my keys when I run because they bounce in the fanny pack and I hate it. So I left the front door unlocked like I always do. When I got back 30 minutes later, the door was locked. My girlfriend Tamsin had left for work while I was out and locked it behind her out of habit. I had no keys, no phone, no wallet. I was standing in front of my own house in running shorts and a sweaty t-shirt with nothing on me except a hair tie around my wrist. Back door, locked. Side window, locked. Garage, locked. Under the mat, nothing. Fake rock by the garden, nothing. Tamsin and I had talked about getting a spare key made for months and never did it. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went around back to the bathroom window, which didn't latch properly because the lock had been broken since we moved in, and I kept saying I was going to fix it and never did. I pushed. It slid right up. I pulled myself through headfirst, tumbled into the bathtub, hit my elbow on the faucet, and lay there for 10 seconds questioning every decision I'd ever made. Then I got up, walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and turned on the TV. About 4 minutes later, someone knocked on my front door. Hard. I opened it. 2 police officers, a man and a woman. The man asked if I lived here. I said yes. He asked for ID. I told him I didn't have any because I'd just come back from a run. He asked again if this was my residence. I said yes again. Then he told me they'd received a call from a neighbor who reported someone breaking in through a back window. I told them that was me. I told them I'd locked myself out. I told them the bathroom window doesn't latch, and I used it to get back inside my own home. The female officer asked if I could prove I lived here. I said my mail was on the counter. She said mail with my name on it didn't necessarily prove I lived here. I said my clothes were in the closet. She said that wasn't proof either. I said there were pictures of me on the refrigerator. She looked at the fridge. There was one photo of me and Tamsin at a pumpkin patch held up by a magnet. She looked at the photo. She looked at me. I was covered in sweat with my hair stuck to my forehead, and I looked nothing like the guy in the photo who'd been showered and smiling in a decent jacket. She said she couldn't confirm it was me. I asked if she was serious. She said they had to treat every breaking and entering call the same way. I told her I'd call my girlfriend to confirm. She said I could make a call. I told her my phone was inside the house on the kitchen counter. She told me I couldn't go back inside until the situation was resolved because the house was now an active scene. I was standing on my own porch being told I couldn't enter my own house. The male officer handed me his phone. I didn't know Tamsin's number. I've never dialed it manually because it's saved in my phone, which was sitting on my kitchen counter inside the house I was not allowed to enter. I told them I didn't know her number by heart. He asked if there was anyone else who could confirm my identity. I said my neighbor Gio across the street could. They knocked on Gio's door. Gio wasn't home. I said my other neighbor to the left could. They knocked. Nobody answered. It was 9 a.m. on a Sunday. Everyone was either asleep or gone. Then the neighbor who'd called the police came out. An older woman from 2 houses down named Francine. I'd lived on that street for 3 years and I had never spoken to Francine. She had never spoken to me. She didn't know my name. She didn't know what I looked like. She just saw someone going through a window and called the police, which honestly I can't even blame her for. The officers asked Francine if she recognized me. Francine looked at me and said she had never seen me before. I told them I'd lived here for 3 years. Francine said she didn't think so. So there I was, standing on my own porch, dripping sweat, while a woman I'd never spoken to in 3 years told 2 cops she'd never seen me before. I could see my phone through the front window, right there on the kitchen counter, 10 feet away. Might as well have been on the moon. Zephyr, the male officer, let out a slow breath and said, "Look, we need to get this resolved quickly, or we're going to have to detain you formally." I said, "What do you mean formally?" He said, "Handcuffs in the back of a patrol car until we can confirm your identity." My chest got tight. I said, "Listen, my lease is on my phone, with my name, this address, my signature. If you let me walk inside for 30 seconds, I can pull it up." Giselle, the female officer, shook her head before I'd finished. She said, "No, the house is still an active scene." I wanted to scream. I pointed through the front window and said, "On the fridge, there's a utility bill. You can see it from here. My name is on it. This address is on it." Giselle leaned and looked. She read it. Then she said, "A bill with a name on it tells me someone with that name gets mail here. It doesn't tell me you're that person." I said, "Then what would prove it?" She said, "A valid photo ID matching your face to this address." I almost laughed. I said, "My ID is in my wallet, which is in the bedroom of the house you won't let me enter." Then Francine called out from the sidewalk, "I walk this street every single day, and I have never once seen that man." I turned to her. 2 houses down. I could hit her mailbox with a tennis ball from my porch. I said, "I've lived here for 3 years. I mow this lawn every Saturday. I park in that driveway. That is my car right there." I pointed at my car sitting in the driveway. Francine looked at the car, then back at me. She said, "I've seen that car. I've never seen you." Something in me broke. Not sad, frustrated. I said, "This is insane. You're going to take the word of someone who doesn't even know my name over every piece of evidence sitting inside that house?" My voice was louder than I meant it to be. Zephyr stepped closer. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice." I said, "I'm standing in front of my own home being told I'm a criminal. How am I supposed to be calm?" Giselle reached for the cuffs on her belt. She said, "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." I said, "Am I being arrested?" She said, "You're being detained until we can verify your identity. Standard procedure." I said, "For climbing into my own bathroom?" She said, "For an unresolved breaking and entering call." I stood there for maybe 2 seconds. Every part of me wanted to keep arguing, but I could see it in both their faces. Talking was done. I turned around. I put my hands behind my back. Giselle put the cuffs on. They were cold and tight and they clicked twice as she adjusted them. And just like that, I was standing on my own front lawn in running shorts and a sweaty t-shirt, handcuffed, while Francine watched from the sidewalk with her arms crossed like everything was going exactly the way it should. The sun was beating down on the back of my neck. I could smell the fresh cut grass from where I'd mowed 6 days ago. All of it was mine. Every single thing I could see from where I was standing belonged to me and the person I loved. And none of it mattered because a woman 2 houses down said she didn't know my face. Then Francine made it worse. She stepped a little closer to the officers and said, "Actually, now that I think about it, I've seen a woman coming and going from that house. A young woman. But I have never seen this man. Not once." I understood exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just saying she didn't recognize me anymore. She was saying she knew someone else lived there. A woman. And I was not part of that picture. She was making me sound sound like a stalker. I said, that woman is my girlfriend. We have lived here together for 3 years. Francine just shrugged. She said, I'm just telling you what I've seen. Zephyr walked over to me. We're going to put you in the patrol car while we continue sorting this out. I said, you are about to put me in the back of a police car in front of my own neighbors for trying to get into my own house. He said, I understand your frustration, but until we can confirm your identity, we are following procedure. They walked me across the lawn. My bare legs brushed against the grass I'd cut less than a week ago. Zephyr opened the back door. I sat down on the hard plastic seat. The door closed. And just like that, I was inside a police car looking out at my own life. I could see my house, the front porch with the 2 chairs Tamsin picked from a garage sale, my lawn, my car, the mailbox at the end of the walkway with the little blue flag I'd painted one afternoon because Tamsin said it would look nice. All of it right there. None of it reachable. That's when I saw someone coming up the street. A guy walking a dog. Some kind of lab mix pulling ahead on the leash. Coffee in the other hand. Easy Sunday morning pace. And I recognized him before he even got close. It was Jasonson. My friend Jasonson, who lives a few blocks over and walks his dog past my street every Sunday morning. I started banging on the window with my shoulder because my hands were cuffed. Over and over. Jasonson heard it. Or maybe he just noticed the patrol car in front of my house. Either way, he looked over. He saw me in the back seat. He stopped dead on the sidewalk, coffee halfway to his mouth. Then he was walking toward the officers with that look on his face like someone had just told him something deeply stupid. Jasonson walked right up like he owned the street. He said, what's going on? Why is he in the back of your car? Zephyr put a hand up. Sir, do you know this individual? Jasonson looked at him like the question was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. He said, of course I know him. He's one of my best friends. He lives right there. That's his house. He pointed at my house. Giselle said, how long has he lived at this address? Jasonson said, about 3 years. With his girlfriend Tamsin. I walk past this house every Sunday. I've helped him move furniture into it. I've had dinner at that table in that kitchen. Giselle asked for his ID. He handed her his license without hesitating. She wrote something down. Then she asked, any other confirmation that he lives at this residence? Jasonson pulled out his phone. He scrolled for maybe 5 seconds and turned the screen toward her. I knew exactly what photo it was. The cookout we had in June. Me, Tamsin, and Jasonson in the backyard with the grill going, the fence behind us. And over that fence, just barely visible but definitely there, was the blue flag on the mailbox. The same mailbox 20 feet from where they were standing. Jasonson said, that's his backyard. That's his grill. That's his girlfriend. That's his house. What else do you need? Giselle looked at the photo for a long time. She zoomed in. She was looking at the mailbox. She was putting it together, but Francine wasn't done. She stepped forward and said, I don't know this man either, pointing at Jasonson. Jasonson turned and looked at her with that expression he gets when someone says something so far from reality, he needs a second to figure out if they're joking. He said, I don't know who you are, but I know who he is, and he lives here. Francine pulled herself taller. I've been on this street for 15 years, and I'm telling you, I have never seen that man before today. Jasonson looked at the officers. She's never seen him? He mows his lawn every Saturday in bright orange shorts. He is not exactly invisible. And he was right. Those shorts are loud. You could see them from space. The idea that Francine had never once noticed me pushing a mower around in neon orange while she supposedly walked this street every day was getting harder to believe. I could see something shifting. Giselle was looking at Francine differently now. Not with suspicion exactly, but not with the same trust either. Then Zephyr's radio crackled. He stepped a few feet away, turned his back, and listened. When he turned back, his face was different. Not dramatically, but something had changed. He walked to Giselle and leaned in close and said something quiet. I saw her eyes move, not her head, just her gaze, sliding sideways and landing on Francine, and staying there a beat too long. Whatever Zephyr had told her, it was about Francine. Zephyr walked to the patrol car and opened the back door. The hot outside air felt better than the stale oven I'd been sitting in. He said, step out. I stood up. My wrists ached. My shirt was soaked. He said, we just ran the plates on the vehicle in the driveway. It's registered to your name at this address. I stared at him. I stared at him for a long time. I looked at the car. My car. The car that had been sitting right there the entire time. The entire time they were questioning me. The entire time they were asking me to prove I lived here. The entire time they were putting me in cuffs. I said, my car. In my driveway. Registered to my name. At my address. That has been sitting right there this entire time. I said each part slowly. Zephyr paused. He said, we should have run it sooner. I said, yes, you should have. I didn't yell it. Just flat and clear. He reached behind me. 2 clicks, and the metal fell away. I brought my hands forward and rubbed the red marks pressed into my wrists. I said, what came through on the radio? He didn't answer. He glanced at Giselle. She took it. Giselle said, dispatch flagged the address of the reporting party. There have been multiple calls from that residence in the past year. I let that sit. Multiple calls. From Francine's address. In the past year. I said, how many? Giselle said, I can't give you the exact number, but it was flagged for a reason. Jasonson said, so she's done this before? She's called the cops on other people? Nobody answered him directly. Giselle looked away. Zephyr cleared his throat, but the silence was the answer, and it was loud. I looked at Francine. Something had changed in her. Her arms weren't crossed anymore. They'd dropped to her sides. She was looking at the sidewalk in front of her feet. I walked toward her, slowly, not aggressive. I stopped about 6 feet away. I said, Francine, I have lived 2 houses from you for 3 years. I wave at you when I check the mail. I have said good morning to you at least a dozen times. You have never once said a word back to me. And today you told the police you have never seen me before. Her eyes moved to my chin instead of my face. She said, I see a lot of people on this street. I can't be expected to know everyone. Her voice was smaller now. Jasonson stepped forward. You told the cops you walk this street every day. You said you've been here 15 years, but you've never noticed the guy who lives 2 doors away? Francine stiffened. She said, I reported what I saw. Someone was climbing through a window. I did the right thing. I said, calling because you saw someone go through a window? Fine, I get that. But standing here and telling them you have never seen me before? That's not the same thing. You made it worse. You made them think I was lying. Her lips pressed together. She said, I was trying to keep the neighborhood safe. I said, you almost got me taken to jail for going into my own house. And then nobody said anything. It was one of those silences that has weight to it. Then I heard a car coming fast. Not speeding exactly, but moving with purpose. It pulled up to the curb and the engine was still running when the driver's door flew open. Tamsin got out. still in her work apron, phone in one hand, keys in the other, hair pulled back the way she wears it during service. She looked like she'd walked out mid-shift without stopping to take anything off or tell anyone she was leaving. She took it all in. The patrol car, the officers, Jasonson, Francine, me, standing in the middle with red marks around both wrists. She'd gotten a missed call from a number she didn't recognize at the restaurant. Something told her to check. She called it back on her break. Zephyr answered. He told her there was a situation at her home address. She said she'd be there in 10 minutes. She made it in 7. Tamsin looked at the officers. She looked at my wrists. I watched her face go from confused to angry in half a second. She took 2 steps toward Giselle and said, "What did you do to him?" Her voice was low and steady and sharp, scarier than yelling. She walked straight to Giselle and said, "This is my boyfriend. He lives here. We have lived here together for 3 years. Who told you otherwise?" Giselle started to explain. Tamsin cut her off. "I locked him out this morning. I left for work and locked the door. He had no keys. He went through the bathroom window because the latch has been broken for months." "You detained him for getting into his own house?" Giselle said. "We were responding to a call, ma'am." Tamsin said, "A call from who?" Giselle didn't answer with words. She turned her head slightly and looked toward the sidewalk. Tamsin followed her gaze and her eyes landed on Francine. Then she was moving, walking with that steady purpose that makes people take a step back without knowing why. She stopped about 4 feet from Francine and said, "You called the police on my boyfriend?" Francine said, "I saw someone going through a window. I didn't know who it was." Tamsin tilted her head. "You live 2 houses away. You have seen him 100 times. He waves at you. He says good morning. He mows the lawn every single Saturday. You told them you'd never seen him?" Francine's chin came up. "I don't keep track of every person on this street." Tamsin stared at her, not with anger exactly, with the kind of calm, clear disbelief that makes the other person feel small without a single word being raised. She said, "You just told the officers you walk this street every day and you've been here for 15 years, but you can't recognize the man who lives 2 doors down?" Francine didn't answer. She couldn't. Tamsin didn't wait. She turned and walked past the officers straight through our front door. Nobody stopped her. She was gone for 45 seconds. When she came back, she was carrying a folder, a stack of mail, and my wallet. She handed the wallet to Zephyr. Photo ID, his face, this address. He opened it, looked at my license, looked at me, looked back. She held up the folder. Our lease, both our names, this address, signed and dated. She held up the mail. Electric, water, internet, all his name, all this address, all sitting on the counter inside the house he wasn't allowed to enter. She dropped her hands. "Is that enough? Or do you need his birth certificate too?" Zephyr said, "Ma'am, we were following procedure." Tamsin said, "Your procedure put an innocent man in handcuffs on his own lawn because a neighbor said she didn't recognize him. He told you he lived here. He showed you his mail. He showed you his photo on the fridge. He pointed to his car in the driveway. And you still put him in cuffs. Which part of that is procedure?" Zephyr was quiet for a second. Then he said, "We could have run the plates earlier. That was on us." Tamsin turned back to Francine. "I want to know why you told them you'd never seen him. You know he lives here. You've seen him, so why did you say that?" Francine opened her mouth, closed it. Finally she said, "I wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure it was him." Tamsin let those words sit. "You weren't sure. So instead of saying I'm not sure, you said you had never seen him before. That is not the same thing." Francine had no answer. She looked at the ground. Her hands were shaking. Just a small shake. For the first time all morning she looked like exactly what she was. A woman who had made a choice and could feel the weight of it. Zephyr straightened up. "You have the right to file a formal complaint if you choose to." I nodded. I didn't say anything. Giselle walked to the patrol car without a word. Zephyr followed. The engine started. They pulled away from the curb, turned the corner, and were gone. Just like that. Francine stood there another second. She didn't look at me. Didn't look at Tamsin. Didn't look at Jasonson. She just turned around and walked back toward her house. No apology. No, I'm sorry. She just walked away. 2 houses down. Jasonson watched her go, then shook his head slowly. He stepped over, put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed it once, and said, "Brother, I'm getting you a spare key made today. 2 of them." I laughed. It came out broken because I hadn't laughed in over an hour, but it was real. Jasonson tugged his dog's leash and headed back down the sidewalk with his cold coffee like nothing had happened. And then it was just me and Tamsin, standing on our porch. She reached for my hands and turned them over to see the marks, the red lines. She touched them gently, running her thumb across them like she could erase them if she was careful enough. She said, "I'm so sorry I locked that door." Her voice cracked. I said, "It's not your fault. Not even a little." We went inside. I walked through the front door for the first time that morning like a normal person. I sat on the couch. The TV was still on. Same channel. Same show. One of those home improvement programs where people argue about countertops. The host was still smiling, like nothing had happened, but something had. I picked up my phone from the counter. I opened a new note and typed at the top in all caps, "Memorize this." I pasted Tamsin's number underneath. Then I searched for a locksmith. A woman answered and said they could make a spare that afternoon. She put me on hold. I sat there with the phone against my ear listening to soft jazz that felt completely wrong for how my morning had gone. I rubbed the marks on my wrists. They were already fading, but I could still feel where the metal had been. On the kitchen counter, Tamsin's keys sat right where she'd dropped them, next to my phone, next to the mail. All the things that had been 10 feet away and untouchable an hour ago. The jazz on hold kept playing. The countertop show on TV kept playing. A door closed outside. 2 houses down, firmly, not slammed, just closed. I waited for the locksmith to come back on the line.